Sir, first France, then it was Britain, I mean UK, now Canada is considering to declare Palestine as an sovereign entity. What would be the consequences with the NATO alliance, American alliance, and what would be the activities of Israeli lobbies around the globe?
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very broad question, but it has implications. These are dramatic turn of events. Considering Europe, in the recent past, we have only seen Ireland, Portugal forthcoming. They were minor members of the EEC. Now we see two of the most important members, Britain and France, and even Canada, going forward to recognize Palestine. This would be a confirmation of the fact that, after all, the two-nation theory might see the light of the day. In the recent past, because of the elimination of so many people in Gaza, it seemed that the very concept of a Palestinian state would fade away. And over that, the attitude of President Trump to convert Gaza into a holiday resort and to, transfer the entire Gaza population off to another country, that was the most depressing news that could have happened. But ultimately, what we see is that it's because of the excesses committed by Netanyahu, who simply wouldn't see any rationale, despite the isolation of Israel in terms of global public opinion. The attitude of Netanyahu to continue the killings, to bar the transfer of aid into Gaza, and to totally disregard the sentiments of the Arab people, even the American allied states in the Arab world like Egypt and Qatar. All of it had turned some of the European nations, the mainstream European nations, including Canada, to ponder over their own national interests. Over and over that, there was this huge impact of public opinion in Europe, especially in England, France, Canada. Public opinion, the universities had been so deeply concerned about the violation of human rights that all of that began to affect the decision-making process of running governments. So this is clearly a slap on Trump's face. It shows that President Trump has to put a stoppage in terms of the way he gave a blank check to Netanyahu. It would also sober down the Israeli lobby in the United States, which had played a double standard, verbally showing a great deal of sympathy for the plight of the Gaza people, and yet in operational terms continuing to tolerate the excesses committed by the Netanyahu government. So now there seems to be some sort of a distancing between President Trump and Netanyahu. President Trump has been overwhelmed by the reality of imposing tariffs on states, and his hands are all tied up. Plus the very fact that he couldn't make any breakthrough in Ukraine, and he has found President Putin to be totally unresponsive to his idea of the survival of the Ukrainian state. That has rattled him very badly. And so we see now that the European countries, especially Canada, France, Britain, they do see that their respective governments would lose the support, and there is already an impact in the United Kingdom and in Canada from the opposition parties to change the foreign policy posture. So I would say that we see faint hopes for a Palestinian state. I would use the word faint because of the fact that if you consider the conceptual perception of recognizing a state, it needs to be backed by real territorial possessions. Unfortunately, the territory of Palestine has been so badly, turned into Bantustans, as you use the term, the pockets of territory, which really makes it impossible to consider having a viable state. And then there is the financial issue that the Palestinian state concept has to be backed by a great pumping of resources in order to reconstruct the damage that has been done by the Israeli army. So, from that point of view, I would say that the very creation of division within the NATO, the very fact that this is a major area for NATO's global policy, this reality has been created in a way where the Americans, especially the Trump administration, has to consider the future viability of NATO. And from that point of view, I don't think the United States can ignore the fact of the reality of a Palestinian state anymore.
Right.
But it would be very interesting to say how President Trump would revert his position, earlier position of ignoring the idea of a Palestinian state, whether he really changes his attitude towards Gaza and he shows a genuine consideration for rebuilding Gaza, which would again make it possible for the Gaza inhabitants to return there.
A complete picture has come from your delivery, sir. Sir, I just want to ask a question to you. You see the PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization's president is Mahmoud Abbas, but he is pretty silent in this issue while Israeli armies are attacking and killing people in Gaza. And Shamsul Alam Pantho says that they have the division, Al-Fatah and Gaza, and Israel is taking the advantages. Why this small country is divided? Why Mahmoud Abbas is silent? And what you expect from this United Nations General Assembly in September, upcoming months?
Okay. Now, as far as Mahmoud Abbas is considered, the first problem is his age factor. He is absolutely almost senile, and the Palestinian Authority have earned a great deal of disrepute for the corruption within. They don't have the support, although this is the official organization to represent a future Palestinian state, it simply doesn't have the popular backing from the people, and especially it's because of the fact that they're considered to be in the pocket of the Western elite. And on the other hand, the Palestinian authorities and Mahmoud Abbas have served as lackeys of the United States, especially the Israeli lobby, in many ways in order to win curry favor. Now, on the other hand, the Hamas, despite the destruction committed by Israel and an effort to eliminate Hamas, has won the hearts of the Palestinian people. They have genuinely sacrificed, they have genuinely built the military wing, and they have been the driving force behind forcing the creation of a Palestinian state. Israel has been genuinely scared of the Hamas, and Hamas wouldn't, make its hands feel clotted by trying to attach themselves with the corrupt Palestinian authorities or with Mahmoud Abbas. So I don't see this as a very great, divisive force, because in any case, the Palestinian authorities under Mahmoud Abbas is almost like being isolated. They don't have any substantive impact, neither do they have any desire to, to use the military arm if necessary. They are almost like a puppet of the Western powers. On the other hand, despite the fact that all the rhetorics go on to destroy Hamas, you see, the problem is the greatest deficit of the Israeli authorities is that when they talk about eliminating Hamas, they really neglect the fact they can kill people, they can remove the structures, but they cannot destroy the spirit that backs the Hamas and the Hamas people. A lot of the members from the Hamas may have died, may have been, sort of thrown out of the region, but the fact is that there is still that power to reorganize. There is still the power to convert, and one cannot forget the fact that despite all the American propaganda and Israeli, display of confidence, Iran has again re-emerged as an extremely important, even more powerful than ever before, in terms of its missile capability, especially its hypersonic missiles capability. The greatest force that would enable the future of Hamas to reborn again is the strength of Iran. And despite all the propaganda, it is almost certain that the Chinese have helped Iran so greatly through a direct railway connection and through a process of continuous support. Chinese ships are already there in the Mediterranean. A strong Chinese support for the Hamas and for Iran would mean, on retrospect, a strong chance for Hamas to re-emerge and to be relevant. I would say that it's this strength, this tremendous potential for Iran to create a huge stock of hypersonic missiles, that would mean that Israel's Iron Shield would become irrelevant. The recent war has proved the most powerful fact that the Iron Shield, which has been the main force of deterrence, is no longer effective. And on the other hand, Iran has the strong backing of not just China, it's the Russians, it's President Putin, who recognizes the fact that his failure to make Trump compromise on Ukraine has now convinced President Putin that he cannot go on ignoring a genuine friend like Iran, which stood by Russia in its worst times. So now, apart from China, even the Russians are forthcoming. I can see a future where the Israelis would only have to pay a very huge price, and I don't see any future for Netanyahu. This was the time for him to give up the idea of using force. This was the time now for him to genuinely recognize the two-state theory, but he has not done so. He is calling his own destruction.